ladies and gentlemen, artist Mary Little.
Okay, so most of you know me, a few of you don't, and I'm just going to start with an introduction about where I am from and to tell you a bit about what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to move my arms around. It drives me crazy and I can't stop it. I don't have pockets. So I was born in Northern Ireland on a farm, rolling countryside on a peninsula that was 3 miles wide. So on the eastern coast it was sandy beaches and sand dunes. On the west coast it was boulders, rocks, very soft formations and things that we could climb on and fall and not hurt ourselves. The landscape where the farms were, really green, little rolling hills, they're called drumlins, and they're pretty much the height of 2 people, really small, so you felt really hugged and enclosed in the environment where I grew up. The farms were, a lot of them were, my uncles and family were surrounding me, ancient fields, ancient hedges, and it was like a patchwork, all very small and cozy. So my career took me, well, from Belfast to London to Milan, back to London, California, to the Bay Area, moved to Connecticut, and then came back to California, and now I'm in Los Angeles, and I've been here for 3 years. And what I want to talk about today is something that is a really big thing in my life, and that is that I'm a sculptor, but I'm also a designer. So I'm trained as a designer. I've had 7 years education as a designer, but I actually think, and my whole sensibility is like, I work as a designer. The way that I like to design best is if I'm designing a chair, something that the body really relates to, and generally I design for myself. I like to create objects that have some kind of relationship to the body and respond to the body. So you deal with functional things like making yourself comfortable, good seat, good back, but then it's all the other things that make it into a sculptural thing, and I want to talk about that now. So I'm going to show some examples, and it starts with this chair, which is called the air chair. The air chair is actually 20 years old. It was a commission by the Museum of Modern Art in Glasgow, and they wanted benches for visitors to sit in, and it was in a gallery called the Air Gallery. It was all white floor, white walls, and skylights. So the whole concept and theme was airiness, lightness. I wanted to make chairs that people could drag around and put in front of a painting. So my proposal was 12 chairs. People could drag them around, and they have this kind of like ballet dancer type feel to the feet, and everything about them, from the metal structure, the forms of the plastic to the plastic feet, is designed to have a sense of lightness and airiness. And just for the sake of this show, it's nice, or for this talk, it's nice to put it in front of some of my artwork, which I'm doing today. So you're seeing work that's 20 years apart, and you can see that there's a kind of common sensibility, and that's the sensibility that comes from the landscape where I was raised. Here you see 2 boulder-like forms, a bench for 2 people, so intimate conversation, 2 people sitting together, head to head, boulders merged together, and it's sculptural. I've shown 2 photographs here of this just to give you some kind of a sense, because photographs in 2D never really put across what happens in 3 dimensions. A brother of this is called Douglas. It's the same kind of concept where it's 2 boulder-like forms merged together, but they're merged differently. And the thing I want to bring your attention to here is the little blue eyes that are popping through. So I love working with cloth, and the whole nature of my life has just been really doing different things with cloth. This is very rare. I have very small amounts of it. It's called shibori. It's made by master craftsmen in Japan. And I wanted to do something where I was using this really sparingly, but really powerfully. So I've put these little pieces. I've slit the felted wool seat and have these little raised areas that are coming through. That's the second view of it. I'll just go back one more time to give you a three-dimensional view. And there's a real ugliness to this piece, and there's a lot of my work where there's an ugliness and beauty at the same time, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy it when there's a kind of a challenge to the work, and that's not necessarily in everything, but it is in some. So this chair that I designed, it was finished in 1985, and it's bringing together everything that I think is important in design as I see it. So that is, I want a seat that enhances how you feel when you sit in it. I want a chair that enhances how you look when you sit in it, and one that looks amazing as a sculptural object when no one's sitting in it at all. So when you're sitting on this chair, you sit on the wooden seat, you can see there's nothing to impede your movement. If you can move your legs around in lots of directions, in a bit more than 180 degrees. Lean against the black, which is actually stretched rubber. If you lean against that, this is me, 1985. My hairdresser's here. You can see how little my hair has changed. And it's gone grey. And so if you think about it, I always want people to sit really properly because it's good for your back. But who does? We all sit asymmetrically. We all move over to one side or another. And at that time, I knew that I sat way over to one side. I was always leaning over to the right. I was always having my right leg over my left. And so I developed this chair that really allowed me to do that. So when I sit in the chair, I feel amazing. The black leather or the black rubber is stretched, so it gives me a real firm support. Because of the form, it lets me move around. So I'm kind of feeling majestic when I'm sitting in this chair. I feel good. I know that I can look good. After that, I did. I really got into cloth, working with fabric. And I have really done that all my life, but this is when I really professionally, seriously got into working with fabric, with my art. So the chair on the left, I call it Rudolph, and kind of after the ballet dancer, of course, because it looks like it's poised and dancing. But it's a descendant of the blue chair. So there's a lot of the same ideas where when you're sitting in this chair and you've got your arms out and you feel very expansive, this chair is actually exploring having your arms out further than in the blue chair. But the thing I want to talk about with this is it's a combination of two things. So the form making is with carving foam and putting fabric on tight around it. And then there's also in the legs, in the lower part, there's making forms and character with the fabric as a loose cloth. There's nothing inside but layers of, there's interfacing, there's stiffness, stiff sheet, and it's really to do with the way the cloth is cut. The chair on the right, Liz, is a similar thing but more voluptuous forms in the bottom. It's only full of air. It's actually not only full of air because it's got the tubular steel frame that supports you. So they all have tubular steel legs and structure, and then the only other thing that's inside the legs is air. So it's the pattern making and the layers of stiffeners that are inside. But the thing I wanted to talk about here with Liz on the right is it's got a regular seat, looks pretty comfortable. It's got a regular back, looks pretty comfortable. And then it's got this orb on the right-hand side. And remember, I talked about me having this sense of always wanting to be over on the right-hand side. So I put the arm on the right-hand side. That's underneath the silk fabric. That's actually just a sphere. It's an orb, very firm support. When you look at it, you think, what's that thing doing there? It's going to get in the way when you sit on it. But when you sit down on it, it's just absolutely the perfect place for your arm, or for your elbow. So you just sit down, put your arm down, and you're totally casual. You just, like at the minute I'm here in front of all of you and I feel a bit awkward, but when you're sitting in the chair and if the armrests are in just the right place, It just really makes you feel wonderful and relaxed and good about yourself, and that's how you should be in a piece of furniture. Aesthetically, stylistically, I, at the time, was looking at things like Hans Holbein paintings that there were an abundance of in the National Gallery in London. And so there was a lot to do with how silk was represented, how cloth was represented in the strange hats from the 17th century. It was all such an inspiration. I have masses of imagery from that time that were really, they just make my heart go when I think about them or look at them. This is Margaret, and it's from the same series. And here I'm cutting away foam. So if you think about it, very often you're sitting in the chair and you're really relaxed. You have no requirement whatsoever for support in between your legs. So I started carving away, cutting away the foam in between my legs. I've made sure that I've got a nice length under my knees, so I've got good support under my legs when I'm sitting really relaxed. And then I've got really good lumbar support in this. Nobody ever thinks my chairs are comfortable, and I love that. But when you sit on them, you just feel a sense of, wow. And I actually hear that word, wow, when people sit in my chairs. And it tells me they were thinking that something horrible would happen to them. And it doesn't. And so this has lumbar support in it, but it's got this slit up the back. And if you think about it, your spine doesn't need support. It's the flesh on either side that needs support. So I cut it away. And those are all the kind of thinking where it lets me do sculptural forms when I take a lead from the body. So the fabric in this is the first time where I really kind of felt like I was getting a hold of what I was doing with the fabric. If you look at the back, and it looks like it's opening up, it's like old-fashioned jodhpur pants, and so the full form, and then there's inner formers that I've put inside. So I'm building up a whole battery of tools and materials that let me make forms that are full forms in fabric, but there's a kind of flexibility to them. I'm able to achieve the forms that I want, but there's a control there. It's not just fabric. Little 8-inch high stools, and these are pebble shapes, definitely referencing the kind of sensibility that I developed with growing up in the countryside in Northern Ireland, and always that kind of gentle softness. But here I've looked at Dior clothing, and if you think about collars on dresses, and they're standing up. So I wanted to replicate and explore that kind of concept. The fabric is a synthetic silk. It has a robustness, and it's iridescent, which is really nice because it really pulls out the quality of the three-dimensional form and the folds and the stretching. And when someone has one of these pieces, then they can arrange the collar just as they want. A client in New York wanted to have a chair for herself, and it was a daytime chair. She wanted it to be white, and she wanted to sit on it every day. So immediately, my brain thinks practical. How do you make a white chair that's really good for multiple years and looks good all the time? This is a woman that came to me because she was a collector. She collected the fiber arts, glass arts, ceramics, and collected furniture. So she was commissioning this piece, and I was listening to how she wanted to use the chair. She wanted to read the newspaper. She wanted to be on the phone. She wanted to do needlepoint. So she wanted to sit astride. So it became a chaise longue that's narrower enough for her to sit on with her legs astride. And I proposed quilting, and quilting is a really good way to have a white base cotton, make it very hard wearing, but to bring in really interesting textures and patterns, so that in the background it's referencing waterfalls, and the seat part is referencing tiles, which are both things that I was thinking of for hot climate, because she actually wanted this for her home in Palm Beach. This client in Chelsea, she had an art gallery in Chelsea, and she wanted a desk and a couple of tables for her brochures and so on, or catalogues. And I wanted to do something really tied back and minimal for her, but something that expressed her gentle and kind of feminine personality. Working with white wool, and I've made reference to things like, leather chaps, leather stirrups, if you think of horse riding, and also making a reference in the quilting on the table on the left to Chanel handbags. So I wanted to have multiple layers in that part where the quilting is. I've got multiple layers to give it that full form. I've quilted them together, and the quilting, I knew I had to quilt it, I knew I had to stitch it, so what are the images, what's the icon that you want to pick up on? And it was the Chanel handbag. So in my case, in this one, it's sketched really loose. I basically just drew it with the sewing machine. I didn't mark it out. I made rough crisscross marks to keep it very casual. And then at other times I do things that are very flamboyant. So I know I work at either end. So there's this great flamboyance in the stool here, and it's felted wool, and it's a mix of yellow, intense yellow with black. I was looking at things like flamingo dresses, and there's something about me, there are times when with working in the furniture world, I very often was working with a lot of guys, and it's really great to do something that's a lot more feminine and flamboyant and put it there right in front of them. So I love that. And this chair, this was a commission for a woman in Washington, D.C., and it's called Fleur. I call my furniture sometimes after the clients. Not all the time, but this time I did. So looking back, this was a real turning point for me. This is just 3 years old. I did this when I first moved to Los Angeles. And with her, I had done 3 sketches for design proposals for her, and she chose one. I looked at it and I thought, wow, I've got this really soft pencil, really thick lead, and I've just done squiggle for the leg. And now I had to interpret it. So how do you interpret a soft pencil squiggle on a leg into something that's in fabric and really rich, and it really is of a quality that needs to be in a... She was putting together a private gallery or museum in DC, and so I started to do lots of trials. I do many trials in muslin. I start with one single sketch, and then everything else from there is 3D. I'm a 3D spatial kind of person. I can't really think flat. So with lots of trials, came up with this thing where there's the fabric is cut in a curvy line, and then sewn together, it gives it this 3-dimensional form. It's much more complex than that, but that's enough to go with. But the fabric here was a really high-quality mix of wool and silk, and because of those two together, the wool gave it this beautiful softness and drape, and the silk gave it the sheen, so it really picks up the suppleness, the wavy lines. It's like a really shiny woman with really shiny hair. So that, for me, felt really important, and it was something that I wanted to go back to again and again. I made many trials, many different kinds of objects from this kind of motif, and this is something where it really transformed into something else. So in my home, a loft in downtown, I needed to divide space, so I made a cloth wall. This is artist canvas, so it's unbleached artist canvas. And it's put together with just repeated patterns, and when it's sewn together, it makes these 3-dimensional reliefs. It picks up, I have east-facing windows, so it picks up the light, the relief, the shadow, repeated pattern. And because it's fabric and it doesn't have a lot of structure, it has that kind of looseness as well, and kind of untidiness. And I love the way it just hits the floor, cut in a rough manner, hitting the floor. So I started to think of, whoops. Just want to go back one more. So I wanted to get into staying in this white cloth. I bought a roll of canvas, staying in the white, working with shadow, working with pattern, working with repeat pattern, and seeing what I could do if I completely ignored function and completely ignored anything that had to do with having a relationship with the body. And that was kind of a little scary, but it was also a real liberation. I felt really excited to do this. That I have periods of time where I'm just working for 2 weeks and not going out, where I just have a massive ideas and I'm making them. Exploring here, pattern, life, light and relief. And with this one, this is about 84 inches long. Looking at how the pattern can be made dense. So there's 3 blocks of very dense pattern, and you get much more intense shadow. And with ever such a slight change, and this is the kind of thing I'm interested in now, how you can get a really big change in outcome with the smallest of iterations, the smallest of changes. With this one, which I've called Dunbar, the pattern that you saw previously, I'd call it a motif. Here I've put it horizontal. I've made the central section a little wider, and the upper and the bottom sections are lower. And it really brings out the fleshiness. Working with gravity, it really brings out the fleshiness of the fabric. And this had there's 2 stories to this that I think are really important. And one of them is, I had a visitor come to see this. She was a girlfriend of a friend, and at one point I saw her in front of this piece and she was crying. And I said, "What's up? How can you be crying in front of this work?" And she said, "It just touches me so much, it just moves me so much, and I don't really know what it is, but I just can't stop crying." So I thought, that's the most amazing accolade for someone to do that. And the other was a really good friend of mine who came to see it, and she's had 3 children, and when she looked at this, she said, "I can't look at this. This is," I don't know if she said the word gross, but she hated it emotionally. And she said, "This reminds me of how I am today rather than how I really want to be." And I've had that comment from another person years ago when I did a chair for her. She saw a chair that I had designed, and she wanted something similar. When I made it, she hated it. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Mary, I'm so sorry, but the one I saw was of me when I was an 18-year-old, and the one that you've got in front of me here is me as I am today. And I'm 45 years old, and I've had 2 children. And I told her, take it home, don't pay for it, and I'll call you in 3 weeks' time," knowing absolutely with 100% certainty that she'd love it in 3 weeks' time. And she did. She loved it. She paid me, and now she's a really great friend, and she's commissioned maybe 8 pieces over the years. So that's just a fantastic thing when your work has that kind of impact on people. And then in contrast, something like this is just real joy, very happy, flamboyant, spontaneity, and that's great too. So in the gallery here, there's a large piece that's 10 foot by 10, and it's picking up in the theme that's on this piece here. This is called O'Reilly. It's just like referencing seaweed, referencing an awful lot of the things from my background, which is always what I'm going back to. And then this piece is, I've got the, I wanted to do something that was just a simple rectangle, but it had a burst of fabric coming. And this is very much to do with how I like to make 3-dimensional forms out of this cloth that I'm now becoming so familiar with. So I made this piece, hung it up, and took it off, hung it up back to front. Thought it was so much more interesting back to front, because here you can see the lines that are coming in. You can see this, what's called seam allowances. So when the 2 pieces of fabric are sewn together, there's 1/2 inch strip on either side. And then when it opens up, in the way that I do it, you've got much more texture, and it gives this surface, it's a large white surface, but it gives that kind of texture and relief, and picks up on the shadow. And then I was going to cut all the rest into, I started to cut the sides into a long, slim rectangle, but just loved the outer edges, loved the kind of serendipity of finding something that was really playing with the circle in the middle. And it took me about 2 weeks of coming back and forward to this and just getting other people to comment on it to make me realize that this is just how it should be and I need to stop right where I am. And that's one of the really exciting things just about, the thing that excites me about what I do. I have a plan and then I work really very much in 3D. I'm working like a sculptor. And then there's so many really interesting things that come out of that that I can go with or not. So there's a huge sense of judgment and a bit of courage that needs to be taken. So these are 4 panels, 24 by 24. And this is the first time I've stretched the canvas onto wooden stretchers, wooden frame. And I really enjoy that you've got the large white tautness around this looseness in the middle. Each of these is made in a different way. They're each made from 2 pieces of cloth sewn together, but the inner line, the inner seam, is hand-drawn, and some of them are flat, some of them have got second little dimples, and then when I put them up on the wall, I just manipulate them and play with them and see what I want to bring out of it. This is a similar concept. It's much more controlled, regulated. Each piece is absolutely identical, and in doing this, of course, there's the reference to the artist Lucio Fontana, where he slashes his stretched canvases. In my case, I've sewn them together, and then the seam line runs inside where you can't see it. But you've got this really lovely sensual forms that are happening all over it, really, and it picks up the shade, the shadow, the highlights, and just really beautiful way that the cloth folds in. And this is me working to the absolute minimal that I probably would do, where it's the same principle as previous. This piece is actually in the exhibition here as well, and it's just a little dimple. And the little dimple, before it goes in, it comes out, and it's actually, I see it as sensual, but it is a very sexual piece as well, framed in a kind of modernist squareness. And then this motif you've seen before, but what was exciting about this was that I put it onto the stretch panel and it looks so different. So the previous ones were just hung from the top and the canvas let to fall however it wanted. And this is pulled really tight, and it's the margin that is around it that I find something that I like to control. I like to think about the boundary of the pieces. And here you've got practically no boundary at all. The pattern moves out as far as possible. You've got the little dimples, now they're horizontal and repeated. I've made as many as I can within the framework. And people are making references to metal fences, and really when people look at my work, or really any artwork, they're going to look at it and say, oh, that reminds me of X, Y, Z. And it's all to do with what your own personal history is and what your own experiences are. And that's something that as an artist you have to let go of. You make a piece and then you put it out, and people are going to see it how they personally want to see it, or it just happens. But so if you look at this, the pattern of this, and then immediately after, this is exactly the same pattern. So I make patterns in paper. This is exactly the same paper pattern as previous, except this one is stretched really tight. So the dimple is pulled really taut. It's got very controlled aesthetic. And then this one hangs up and it does its own thing. And I love that. When I hung this up, the first thing I thought was, well, actually before it was hung up, I thought, I'll hang it up and then I'm going to make it really neat and tidy. Just start at the top, neaten it all up and work all my way down and make it really neat. But as soon as I turned around and stood back from it, turned around and looked at it, I thought, I love this just as it is. And so every time I take it down and put it back up, it's different because it's a malleable, it's soft, flexible cloth. I just love the randomness of this kind of thing and the way it picks up light in different ways. And the way that the edge is not crisp, regular corners, and then the sides here it goes in and out. It does its own thing. And this piece, which I called Mun, is exactly the same as this, but the pattern is 4 times the size. So this is one of the other things that I'm exploring is scale and how that affects the canvas. From the narrow palette that I'm that I'm working within, how much you can do within it. And then this is another one where the pattern goes vertically rather than horizontal, and it's really dense. And then there's the margin up at the top, just one margin at the top, that's depth. And then on the sides, just because of the length that I've let it stay, it comes out. So when you walk around this piece, you can see behind, you can see the sides. And then at the bottom, the margin is so tight to the pattern that it just hugs the wall. And I love that kind of thing. This is an Aran sweater, and traditional Irish sweater. And when this time last year, I was in Belfast with all my family, and my mum died this time last year. And we were clearing our house, and I found this little bag, a little gift bag, and inside with this tiny little baby sweater. It really is literally a really little thing. And I knew why it was there. It was because each one of us, when we wanted to, if we had a friend who was having a baby, we'd call my mum and say, "Can you make her a little sweater? Can make him a little sweater?" And sometimes she had some in stock. So this one I took, and photographed this, put it on Instagram, and I was just sitting looking at Instagram, looking at that photograph one night, and all around me in the studio, I could see my work, and I thought, wow, this is so close to my work. And I had not seen it before, and this was maybe 1.5 years into me making my unbleached canvas pieces, working with relief, and I truly had not seen the connection. And so she worked with yarn, unbleached, knit it together into traditional patterns that always had a massive infinite variations. I was doing just the same. So first time I had the chance, I make all of my works in series. First time I had a chance, I decided to make a series of pieces that were inspired by my mum and inspired by Aran sweaters. So the key thing is scale, and using a couple of different motifs and patterns and putting them together. And in this one, it's called Sheila. All of the pieces are roughly 60 by 60. So the pattern from an earlier piece, another pattern going horizontally from a different piece. So I'm looking again. I'm revisiting the patterns that I've developed, which is really for me an exciting thing to do because I get to know them better. Betty, this is called. That was my mum's name. Nice kind of cleanness along the bottom. Really intense busyness. Not sure what I think of this sometimes when I look at it. I love the little dimples that are in the lower part, so I'm trying to put pattern within pattern and pattern against pattern. And then in this one, I really love the white expanse at the top. And the white expanse is a contrast to the very much flamboyant folds of fabric in the bottom. And so at the top, it's all stripes. They're maybe 2¼ to 2½ inches wide. And you get that kind of dimply, natural effect that comes from it. Just the contrast of the two. This is, for me, this is one of my most successful pieces of the later works, but I know that everybody, when they look at work, they see something different. This is the last piece that I'm going to show you. And this is where the title of the exhibition comes from, and the title of this talk, and that's Intent and Serendipity. And I think you probably know already that all the way through there's intent, which is in design, planning, forward thinking, but then there's what happens when something happens that you didn't quite expect, or how do you relate to this thing in when you're thinking like a sculptor and feeling like a sculptor. How do you relate to this thing when it turns out to be something that isn't what you expected? So hung up this piece. One of the really funny things is when I hang up a piece and I'm right up close, walk away, have to walk away 8, 9 feet, and then standing there with my back to it thinking, what am I going to see? Because so many times I just don't know what I'm going to see. It's just so different when it's on the wall from when I'm making it. So I hung this piece up, turned around, looked at it, and I could see all those little mask type pieces. They weren't like that, but one of them was, and I started to play around with it, punch it and push it through, push it back, just make it into something that I hadn't intended. It's got such a much more three-dimensional sense to it, and there's 1, 2, 3 different patterns within that, and then when you think of it wider, there's more. So this just sums up what I was trying to do with my mum's Aran patterns and the inspiration from that. All my life I have been a furniture designer, sculptor, and just in the last 3 years since making that large canvas that was for my room, I have been working on something that is devoid of anything to do with function and relation, anything that has a relationship to my body. And I keep thinking, well, I miss this. But it's actually the opposite. I have very few narrow options in what I'm exploring. And I find that the constraints of those options are making me even more creative. I thought I'll maybe dry up. It will be something that I'll do for 6 months. But really, it just feels like I can't wait to go home to keep on making more. That's how it feels. Thank you very much.